Hello, and welcome to Hedgehog Storytime, where I read my weird original fiction. The following is part of the Mayhem Cerebrum project. Links to the playlist in the description below. Yes, you have to read them all. No, that is not a request. I hope you enjoyed part 1. I'm kind of dipping my toes into mystery a little bit. I've always wanted to write mystery stories, but mystery stories are really difficult to write. So you'll notice a lot with some of these early episodes in chapter 2 of Mayhem Cerebrum that I'm slowly dipping my toes into it. I'm getting closer and closer to writing a true mystery story. And this was one story I was using to experiment with some of that. So I hope you will enjoy the conclusion. And here we go. Without further ado, here is Big Trouble in Little Akuma, Part 2. Jack's head hurt, which was funny considering that they'd hit his neck to knock him out. He'd expected that, had left the back of his neck exposed just for that very purpose, but he hadn't expected it to radiate all the way up into his brain. Typical, he supposed. Subtly, he sniffed the air, trying to gather as much information about where he was before his captors knew he was awake. His nose hadn't always been this good, but he tried not to think about things like that anymore. It came in handy in times like this anyway. The space he was in was dry and dusty. Above ground, he thought, as it lacked the smell of mold and damp. There was one person in the room with him, most likely. Inevitably, they were waiting for him to wake up. They seemed anxious, as he noticed the soft, repetitive swoosh of their leg bouncing up and down. All right, that was enough of that. Jack opened his eyes and blinked a few times. The few shafts of light glistening through knots in the walls were exacerbating his headache. The rest of the room was so dark in comparison, however, that it was difficult to make out much of anything about it. The other person he'd sensed was sitting on a wooden chair by the far wall. They were indeed bouncing their leg, but it was impossible to tell whether it was truly from anxiety or maybe impatience, as he was wearing, of course, yet another fox mask.
You Kita bastards really love those masks, eh?
Jack's voice came out rough and hoarse. The fox's leg stopped bouncing as soon as he heard him. If you saw our faces, you would simply hunt us down.
No need.
Jack laughed.
You're already right here.
You have a smart mouth for someone tied to a chair. Ah, that's right. He hadn't really paid it much mind, but it seemed he'd been shoved onto a very uncomfortable wooden seat, rope digging into his wrists from how tightly they'd been tied. Well, this was somewhat novel for him, he supposed. He wasn't usually on this side of the torture table. Because that was definitely what was happening here. The fox stood and grabbed a very long, thin knife from where it was hanging on the wall. Have you ever heard of Ling Chi? He asked, testing the knife's edge.
Can't say that I have.
Jack drawled. This was a good start. Textbook, but effective. The fox was about to describe exactly what he was going to do to Jack, no doubt in excruciating detail. That made it hurt more, if it even got that far. Anticipation was often worse than the torture itself, and for the more squeamish, a victim would often break before you even got to lay a finger on them. Jack hated when that happened, so he usually kept it vague. It means death by 1,000 cuts, the fox explained. I will start slowly, perhaps cutting chunks of fat or muscle from your shoulders, your legs. Then I will move on to your extremities, like your fingers and toes.
Fascinating. Mind if I take notes?
Next will come your genitalia, and then your nose, the fox continued. He clearly had this whole speech planned out and didn't intend to be interrupted, which was a damn shame. Made it feel like his heart wasn't in it. This entire process should take about 5 hours, at which point I will begin taking more important things. Jack shook his head.
Now wait just a bleed minute there, mate. If you're going in order of importance, you best save my cock and balls for last.
You will live without them. Your fellow mutts do it all the time. There it was. Took him a minute to warm up, but there was the banter Jack had been missing. A little stiff, maybe. Low-hanging fruit, definitely, but easily workshoppable.
Honestly, I'd rather you go for my eyeballs or something first.
Don't be ridiculous. Those go last. Laying it on a bit thick, in Jack's opinion.
All right, mate.
He yawned.
That's all fine and well, but you've forgotten one thing. What's your motivation?
Excuse me?
I mean, usually if you're going to spend, 8 bloody hours slowly cutting a bloke limb from limb, you tend to want something from him, right? Either that, or you really hate his fucking guts. So I suppose, what I'm trying to say is, do I got a way out of this?
Absolutely none. Curious. But he supposed there must have been quite a number of people who wanted him dead.
Well, all right, brother. Suppose you best get started, or I might fall asleep before you get anywhere. I've got this terrible bloody headache, you see.
You want to say that again? Ah, this one had a temper. He hadn't been impressed up until now, but that was simply the nail in the coffin, and Jack really didn't like thinking about those. A torturer couldn't afford to get angry. It made them seem too human, made the victim think they could negotiate. Bad for business. The balance of power was all wrong.
Yeah,
Jack grinned.
I said that I might fucking fall asleep if you keep chin-wagging like that.
The fox grabbed him by the collar, his mask an inch away. Maybe I'll start with your tongue. He growled, but that was exactly what Jack had been waiting for. Before the fox had any time to react, he reared back and headbutted him. There was a hard crack as his forehead met the mask, but it looked like the pressure had been enough as the fox staggered backwards. This gave Jack enough space to stand and reveal that his wrists were no longer tied. It was a good thing the fox had been such a jabberer, as he'd given Jack more than enough time to pick the thin rope apart with his somewhat jagged fingernails. Without a care in the world, Jack snatched the knife from the fox's hand by grabbing the bladed end and cackled as he watched the man's body language shift from confusion to horror.
You know, mate,
Jack remarked casually, wiping his own blood off the knife with his coat sleeve,
you're not very good at this.
The man tried to scramble up and away, but Jack slammed his foot down on his knee, the steel toe cracking right through the bone. He twisted a little, really rubbing those fragments of kneecap in. Jack grabbed him under the arms and threw him into the chair that he himself had just sat in.
I mean, you've got the basics down, but it's all very textbook, isn't it? Plus, you smacked your gob too long, made it seem like you was hesitating.
The fox was incoherent now, babbling about something or other. Jack lifted his chin so he was forced to look at him.
But don't worry, mate. I'm about to give you a crash course. Now, you might have your fancy little technique, but it don't mean shit if the Vic doesn't get a little taster. That's why I just crushed your kneecap, because now you understand that that is just a fraction of what I'm about to do to you.
Wait, the fox whimpered. Don't you want to know who we are or why we've come after you? Jack just laughed.
If that's your trump card, and I shouldn't have been the one you snatched, I don't give a fucking fig about any of that. I just want to see you bleed.
The fox shuddered. That was good. Jack had always been a very hands-on sort of teacher. He'd gotten a bit rusty over the years, but it looked like he hadn't lost it quite yet. It seemed his pupil was easily grasping the lesson.
Now, as it turns out, I've got a pretty fancy technique of my own.
As he said this, he ran the knife slowly across the man's shoulder, only just barely cutting it open. This was a very sharp knife. At least he'd gotten that part right. Though Jack wished he also had a duller one for the rough and dirty work.
It's called I Break Your Face In. Here, let me show you how it's done.
With a last swish, he completed the cut, and the fox winced. Then, using the still bloody knife tip, he lifted up the mask on the fox's face. Upon seeing Jack's face entirely unfiltered, the fox simply passed out. Said horrifying visage fell. That was disappointing. Oh well, he had ways of waking him back up. But wait. Something was wrong. Narrowing his eyes, Jack sniffed the air.
Hold on,
he muttered.
You're not a fox at all.
After their attackers had vacated the alley, dragging Jack with them, Kay and Bake slunk off, trying to get out of the open as quickly as possible. Of course, the place Bake led them to happened to be an opium den. This is a terrible place to hide, Kay said, coughing. If they're looking for you, this will be one of the first places they check.
Yeah, but they'll never find me with all this smoke.
He tapped his forehead with his finger and grinned at her like he was incredibly proud of his intellectual prowess. Kay rolled her eyes. Yet they were already here. There was no point in going back outside, so she didn't complain.
A private room for me and the lady, please.
Bake threw a small sack of bones onto the front counter, and the very long neck of the individual behind it wobbled as he took a look inside. Satisfied, he gestured them to follow, bending down to avoid a crossbeam that must have been 8 feet off the ground at least. They trailed behind him through a lounge area, the patrons of the den sprawled on couches, futons, and some even laying on the floor. Each held a pipe or similar instrument of inhalation, and the top half of the room was so hazy that it was hard to make out any other details at all. Kay stepped over someone tangled up in a yukata right under her feet. They looked like they'd been here far too long, and Kay's nose crinkled from the smell. But they passed quickly by and into a small, dark hallway. The attendant knocked on the door at the very end, and, having not received any response, opened it. It looked like a fairly normal, if heavily used, sitting room, with 2 worn settees on one side and a round wooden table on the other. On it, several long pipes with bulbs on the end had been meticulously placed around an oil lamp and a jar full of round beads. There were more modern methods to heat the opium, but Kay was sure Bake probably appreciated the old-school nature. He was weird about his drugs like that. The only problem was that the room reeked with the almost overpowering smell of hazelnuts, or maybe cooked marshmallows. Whatever it was very sweet and very a lot. Kay prayed that she'd eventually stop smelling it. The attendant bowed and closed the door behind them. Bake immediately made for the table and went for a pipe. Is this really the time for that? Kay intoned, though she was sure she probably already knew the answer. I mean, we've got to figure out what those fuckers want and now where they're keeping Jack, right?
I think better like this,
Bake insisted, placing one of the small beads in the tip of the pipe and holding it sideways over the lamp. And besides, you're sober. Of course. Really, he expected her to do all of it for him. In all honesty, he probably wouldn't be much help even if he was stone cold anyway. Sighing, Kay plopped down on the cracked leather sofa. Well, it's not like we have much to go off of. We don't even know what any of their faces really look like.
Real dramatic, ain't they?
Bake flopped down next to her. She was so deep in thought that she barely noticed him snaking his free hand around her shoulder. Well, that's the thing, she frowned. The Yakuza groups usually take themselves a lot more seriously than that.
I guess it's a bit on the nose, the family of foxes wearing fox masks, but we know who they are without knowing who they are, right? Makes sense to me if they wanted us to know who's responsible.
Maybe. They sat in silence for a minute, the only sound the quiet inhale whenever Bake took a puff from the pipe. But when he was involved, silence could only be maintained for so long.
Wow. This one's really stumped you, huh?
She narrowed her eyes at him. What, you think I plan everything I do in 5 seconds? I'm not like you. I can't just come up with all the answers off the top of my head. He just giggled.
What? You think I plan?
You know what? That was stupid of me. Now, let me think.
Well, would you mind thinking out loud? I'm getting antsy.
You are a child. You know that?
And? Your point?
She just sighed. Fine. I was just trying to recall what I actually know about the Kita family. It's not much since I have unfortunately kind of taken signs already, but from what I do know, this is just weird.
I mean, no shit. They kind of sent martial artists after us in a back alley.
But that's exactly what I mean. Kay folded her legs against her chest. There's a reason they're the number 2 family in Akuma, and that's because they're way less ballsy than the Yamashita. They don't like taking many risks at the very least.
Explains the fox masks.
But really, that doesn't make sense either. Again, unlike the Yamashitas, the entire Kita family is made up of kitsune. It's kind of a requisite to join. If you can change your face at will, then why wear a mask?
To make a statement?
That's the only reason I can think of. Bake for once almost looked thoughtful as he exhaled the thick smoke.
I mean, the Tea Party has kind of gotten in bed with the Yamashitas.
You wish. Kay scoffed.
Hey, a man can dream, right? But anyway, that might be why they're targeting us so specifically, trying to break up the powwow.
That makes no sense. Kay shook her head. If that was the case, they'd go after the Yamashitas, not us. All they're doing is making us into enemies, not friends. Kay fell silent. After a minute, Bake looked down and saw that she was thinking very hard about something. Her lips were pursed together, and she stared intently at a spot on the wall.
What are you thinking? He asked.
Oh, nothing. She breathed in suddenly and waved him off. I'm just getting too deep into it, I'm sure. Overthinking it. Bake's eyes narrowed, and in response, Kay stood and walked a few steps away, her back turned to him. In all honesty, she insisted, you're probably right.
Bullshit.
When Kay turned around, her breath caught in her throat. In the few seconds she'd been regaining her composure, Bake's demeanor had changed entirely. He still sat casually on the couch, but now, even though his head was tilted downwards, his eyes glowed very brightly, even behind his hair. I have no idea what you're talking about, Kay said, a little weakly. He laughed, a grating, unnerving sound that made her hair stand on end.
Of course you're gonna try to play dumb,
he drawled, standing slowly.
But you just figured it out, didn't you?
What on earth makes you think that? She scoffed, standing straighter.
You must think I'm real stupid, huh?
He was smiling, but it was wildly unpleasant and didn't reach his eyes. He took a step towards her, and she took a step back.
And maybe I am, but I can tell when someone's lying to me, especially you.
She was nearly against the wall now, and he pressed her into it, his arm above her head, keeping her in place.
You do remember what I can do to you, Kay?
If he was trying to scare her, it wasn't working. You won't, she said through gritted teeth.
Oh?
He tilted his head, looking directly down at her.
Who's to say we can't go for round 2 in the labyrinth?
I'm hurt, she mock-pouted. I thought we were past all that. He leaned in closer.
I thought we were too, but I'm down to clown if you are.
I don't think so. Kay managed a soft smirk. Because you really need what I know, and if you dump me in the labyrinth again, I will never tell you.
Why should I care?
For shame, she clicked her tongue. I can't believe you already forgot about poor Jack. I'm telling. She got him. His face dropped. He wasn't giddy anymore, just angry.
All right then, Kay. What do you want? I might be willing to make a deal, but if I don't like it, just know that I've got other ways of getting my damn dog back.
She smiled, though underneath she still felt herself just about dangling off a cliff. She was going to have to be very careful about this. I'm more than willing to tell you what I know. But you have to promise me one thing first. Kimiko seemed surprised that they contacted her for a meeting so soon. It had been less than 1 day since the first attack in the bathhouse. But of course, being the gracious hostess that she was, she suggested her own home for the location, just as Kay was hoping she would. And so, as the green and purple sky darkened ever so slightly, Kay and Bake approached the large gate at the front of the practical compound that made up her abode. It was located in a quiet part of Akumacho, one of the few places in the whole of Discord with trees. It was also right at the heart of Yamashita territory. As they approached, the gate slid open silently. On the other side, Kimiko waited with several attendants. With her flowing kimono and severe posture, she looked rather like a queen. No doubt she was trying to impress Bake. Clearly, she still didn't know how he ticked all that well yet. They followed her across the meticulously raked rock garden and over to the main house. Kay saw Bake's gaze drifting towards all the lines in the sand and grabbed him before he could follow through on his intrusive thought to utterly wreck them. Should we talk by the pond? Kay suggested as Kimiko made to head inside. It's such a nice evening. Kimiko's expression was unreadable. By all means, follow me. They continued through the main entrance, a rather simple affair done in the traditional Akumite style with its minimal decoration and tatami floors, but then she led them straight through a paper door and out to the back courtyard. The house surrounded it on 3 sides, yet it was still spacious enough to contain a small pond, aside which a willow tree drooped into the water, a well-maintained flower garden, and a shed which most likely contained tools for a said garden. Kimiko sat gracefully down on a marble bench overlooking the pond. Kay and Bake stayed standing. So, Kimiko prompted, what exactly was it you had come to discuss? Bake strolled off a few paces towards the pond.
Oh, only the identity of who's been after us and what they want.
Who? Kimiko looked surprised. I thought the identity of the assailants was fairly obvious. That's what we thought too, Kay muttered.
You know, what with the really obvious fox masks and all.
Kay shot him a glare, but either he hadn't noticed or was pretending not to. But I think we may have been mistaken. What makes you say that? Kimiko stared down at her hands in her lap. Well, there were just a couple of things that were weird about the whole thing, Kay admitted. The use of masks, despite the fact that the kitsune are face shifters already, the fact that they attacked us in the first place, and that when we were attacked, it was exclusively within Yamashita territory. Kimiko froze, but didn't say anything.
'Cause first of all, Bake continued, seeing that she was going to make them spell it out, it doesn't make sense for the Kita to target the tea party. If they were upset that we were cozying up to you, they'd try to take the Yamashita down instead, 'cause now they've closed the door entirely to take in your place. Right, in my fucking face, I might add, so it makes no sense that they would do something so stupid.
He started pacing. By now, Kay could tell the difference between when he was actually agitated or when he was just trying to make someone else nervous. Right now was definitely the latter.
However, he continued, there is one person who benefits from making the Kita my enemy. One person who is probably pretty anxious to solidify our connection.
Who? Kimiko managed.
Bake chuckled to himself. You've got a great poker face, Kimiko, but let's cut the shit. Where's my fucking dog?
She blinked. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Are you accusing me of something?
Yeah, sicking people with fox masks on us and stealing my dog.
Kimiko, Kay sighed. Don't play dumb. We know it was you. I'm appalled that you'd even suggest such a scheme, she scoffed, and also a little hurt. I thought we were friends, Kay. Why would I ever want to hurt you? That's the part that confused me the most, Kay admitted. It ended up being the perfect ploy, if it had been on purpose. Kimiko's eyes narrowed in confusion. Because the thing is, you didn't attack me. At least not on purpose. When they came after us in the bathhouse, they only went for the men's bath. If I hadn't snuck in there, I would have been left alone entirely, which I appreciate. Kimiko's eyes widened. While that may be true, perhaps had you not been in the men's bath, they would have come for you next. Ultimately, you don't have any proof. You're not wrong, Kay sighed. But please don't draw this out any more than we need to.
Huh, that's weird. This shed's unlocked.
While the two women had been talking, Bake had slunk off to the small garden shed towards the back of the courtyard. Kimiko stood suddenly. I asked you not to touch that.
Why not?
Bake grinned.
Is there something in here you don't want me to see?
Even though he asked the question, he didn't let her respond. Instead, he simply slid open the door and peeked inside.
What took you so bloody long?
Asked a voice from within, and Kay ran up as she recognized it. Of course, there was Jack, lounging in a chair with his feet resting on an unconscious man, picking something out of his teeth with a knife and absolutely covered in blood.
Sorry, dude, had to take a pit stop in an opium den first. You know, while I was in town. It's all right. Found the key on this idiot.
He pointed down to the lump of human agony at his feet.
And I almost left, but I figured I'd finish up first.
Coming up beside Kay, Kimiko's face turned an unpleasant shade of green.
Well, Yamashita-sama?
Bake grinned mockingly.
I'd say that counts as proof enough.
The green shade only intensified. I suppose it does. You're right, my lord. I was the one responsible. Everything you said was entirely correct. She bowed deeply before him. Please met out whatever punishment you deem appropriate. Though she waited, nothing happened. Bake only sighed.
Would that I fucking could, he grimaced. There are so many wonderful tortures that I would love to put you through, but you're one lucky bitch with some real good friends.
Pardon? She raised her head slightly.
As much as I'd like to tango with you, I'm not allowed. I made a promise that I wouldn't lay a finger on you.
Kimiko's mouth opened as she glanced over at Kay, who shrugged sheepishly.
Just remember this.
Bake leaned down, turning her chin to look at him.
I like you. You've got some real balls behind all the grease paint. But if you ever try to pull a stunt like this ever again, I'll string you up like the filthy little spider you are. Capiche?
She nodded. Bake let her go, standing abruptly.
All right, then. I think we're done here. 'Kay?
I'd say so, yeah. Awesome. Autobots roll out.
I've got no fucking clue what that.
But Jack just sighed.
You know what, fuck it.
They followed Bake out of the courtyard while Kay stayed behind, even if just for a moment. Kimiko seemed at a loss for words. Thank you. Now we're even. Kay shrugged, as if Kimiko's biggest offense had been calling her shoes ugly. We still on for drinks on Friday? Well, considering I'm not hung in the main square or rotting in the labyrinth right now, I'd say my schedule is pretty clear. Kimiko smiled. Kay smiled back.